Great to be back. I believe we were separated by sleet and snow last time. I just want to kind of bring us back to where we left off and kind of remind ourselves what we talked about last time, and then we can kind of head off in a new direction. But I just sort of introduced the idea that in this poem called Creation, everything was good until God saw that man was alone and then created woman. And through that, in that poem, it became a more whole and good place because of both man and woman. And in that beauty and goodness, we kind of explored this idea that although there's much the same about both man and woman, and there's no 100% man brain or woman brain, there are ways that we can be both same and different in how we communicate, how our brains work, etc. And I sent you off on a challenge with your group to kind of fill in the sentence, the thing that you wish as a girl that all guys knew about you. And likewise, we asked the guys to do that. And so Josh and I are going to read those responses because I think it's fun, especially in light of that video and the video we saw last time. I think it's interesting. Listen to how this kind of underlines everything that we talked about last time. Okay, I'll read the girls, Josh will read the guys, and why don't you start?
Okay. Things that guys wish girls knew about them. Number one, we are listening even when it looks like we're not.
No matter how many times you say, I am pretty, I still need to believe it myself.
We have the ability to compartmentalize issues.
If I say I'm fine, but I seem sad, ask me again.
Please keep it chill.
Speak up and speak your mind. Don't just dote on me.
We are very visual, and it's easy to objectify women, and we value modesty.
We are attracted to confidence.
We aren't thinking about sex all the time.
We wish you would text us first, then we don't have to be out there.
You look amazing in sweats and no makeup.
We value the truth and acknowledgement.
We have emotions.
Please act mature when it matters.
We care what you have to say, but sometimes we don't want to hear all the details at once.
We share more interests with you than you realize.
We don't need other people's opinions about our problems. Keep it between you and I.
Assuming stereotypes about women is hurtful.
We don't like it when we're talking about ourselves and you put the focus back on you.
Oh. We are extremely self-conscious and sensitive. Even little comments as jokes can sometimes hurt.
You don't have to guess what we're feeling. You know because we mean what we say.
Girls remember everything.
We like it when you're there for us, but please don't get in our face about it or push us to talk more than we want to.
We tend to overanalyze things.
We tend to have deep conversation when we're tired because we're less distracted.
We both need to understand that we go through completely different things.
Fight or flight is true unless we simply don't care.
That is so awesome. Because I want you to know that not every girl that you hear is a slut actually is. And even if she is a slut, it doesn't mean she's a bad person.
You guys wrote it. Sometimes we honestly don't care what you're saying. Honesty is the best policy.
Don't judge our past mistakes.
We greatly dislike drama.
Fat, I'm going to catch up with you a little bit. I think I have a couple extra things. Fat is the worst thing you can say. Small things can hurt our feelings. If a guy is friends with our best friend, we get jealous. I'll just finish. Okay. I'm fine and leave me alone. I don't always mean that.
Well, that's one. We do hear you.
Love it. What do you guys think? True, I think. Huh?
From the girl side, it's very true.
Did you hear things that really ring true? I did. I loved it. I thought you guys did an amazing job. Any other thoughts or comments? Did anyone want to disagree? Something that didn't ring true. I thought you did an outstanding job. I tonight want to talk about decision making. But I'm going to start with my favorite piece of scripture in the world, because I think it has to do with being wise and making mistakes and trying to understand what God thinks about that and how he would look at decision making and how he looks at me as a person. And I'll just read part of Psalm 139, not the whole thing, but the part that really resonate with me when I think about who I am as a person and decision maker as a child of his. Oh Lord, you have searched me and you know me. You know when I sit and when I rise. You perceive my thoughts from afar. You know my going out and my lying down. You are familiar with all my ways. Before a word is on my tongue, you know it completely, O Lord. You hem me in, behind and before. You have laid your hand upon me. Where can I go to hide from your spirit? Where can I go to flee from your presence? If I go to the heavens, you are there. If I make my bed in the depths, you are there too. If I rise upon the wings of the dawn, if I settle on the far sides of the sea, even there, your right hand will hold me fast. If I say, surely the darkness will hide me, and the light become night all around me, even the darkness will not be dark to you. The night will shine like the day, for darkness is like light to you. Now, what I love about that is that, all of us are out there making decisions every day. You make decisions all day. You're making decisions whether to brush your teeth or kiss the girl or eat your vegetables or pay attention to your dad and go to college or, drive the car too fast or smoke a cigarette. I don't know. It's all throughout your whole day. And there's an interesting thing and a lot of studies done about teenagers and decision making. And one of my favorites is one that's done at Stanford University. It's a fabulous question. They ask the question, who makes a great decision maker? So first they had to kind of define what a decision maker was. So they came up with 3 characteristics. Listen carefully to what those 3 characteristics are and then think about yourself. The first characteristic is you can act autonomous but still be a part of a group. You can act alone even if the whole group is going a different direction. Okay? Autonomous within a group. The second idea, you can pause before you act on a strong feeling. Okay, you can pause. Even if you feel super mad, you could actually pause before you acted. And the third idea is that you could think of others beyond yourself or time beyond this moment. Okay, kind of got that feel for that? So the Stanford University people, they went out and they talked to a ton of people. They talked to elementary school kids, middle school kids, high school kids, college kids, and young adults. And they scoured them over. They put them in focus groups. They tested them. They even handwritten things. They showed them videos. They made them act out all sorts of decision-making thing. And they came up with one incredible group of people that were amazing decision makers. Who were they?
Teenagers.
Who were they? The teenagers.
Really?
No.
The elementary kids.
They were the 6th graders. 6th graders rose to the top of all of those people from elementary, from kindergarten, all the way up to 25. The 6th graders just surpassed them all on those 3 characteristics of decision making. Now I can tell you what I love about that study is that I see it all the time. Because if I put 6th graders in a challenging situation, they know just what to do. They'll say, well, I just wouldn't do that. My dad would get mad. 6th graders are the last bastion of concrete thought. Because your brain goes from being super concrete when you're in elementary school, and as you go through middle school and high school, it gets very abstract. I could put the 8th grader in the exact same torturous peer pressure situation. In the 8th grader, I could get to cry. I've made 8th graders cry. I've put them in such challenging situations because they feel completely tortured. They'll go, well, will my dad find out about that? Would I lose a friend? When you become more abstract, you actually can think more gray. Teenagers sometimes are challenged as decision makers because they actually see that decisions are not just black and white like a 6th grader. They see that anytime you say yes or no, you could lose or gain. Right? You know this is true because when you wrote an essay in the 6th grade about cougars, the first paragraph was just totally black and white. Food that cougars eat. The second was, landscapes familiar to cougars. And the third one was, mating rituals of cougars. It was very concrete information. Now you could write a whole pro and con around whether we should reintroduce cougars to, Yosemite. Right? You see that the world is gray. And that makes it challenging. Here's another really interesting thing. When you look at all sorts of let me just tell you who the worst decision makers were. The best were the 6th graders. In that whole group between kindergarten and 25, 6th graders to the top. The absolute bottom, the lowest point in decision-making prowess were the 11th graders. The juniors in high school. It takes a very deep, dark dive after 6th grade and just plummets to the bottom at 11th grade, and then crawls its way back up to about 23 and 25. 23 for girls, 25 for boys. You know what's so amazing about that? It completely reflects data across the nation about kids making decisions that affect their health. When you look at data of kids who smoke cigarettes or drink beer or drink anything really alcohol-wise or take drugs or have sex, the data almost always doubles between 10th and 11th grade. Isn't that crazy? So that data, when you look at the whole big nation, the data actually reflects this idea that at 11th grade you're at the bottom of decision-making prowess. But the other thing that is amazing is we know that your brains between puberty, the time you're about 12, and the time you're in your early 20s completely goes under construction. I drew a brain last time. Is this the pen for me, Josh?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Here's your brain again, this kidney bean. And we talked about how this is the thinking part of your brain. And you've got this emotional center right here. Every decision that you make, whether you're an infant or an 11th grader, every decision that you make involves emotions or feelings. Every single one. There is no decision that is purely removed from an emotional space. And in fact, between birth and 12, your brain will make most of its decisions defaulting to an emotional place. All kids and most as teenagers get older, their brains begin to change. But for the most part, kids will become more emotional decision makers. When they're mad, they hit someone. When they're angry, they cry. When they're fearful, they stomp around, right? It's an emotional response. They call teenagers moody because of that. You default to an emotional place. One of the very last parts of your brain that gets developed, your brain develops from the back to the front. In the front, this is the computer. This computer is totally wired up in your brain by the time the boys are 25 and the girls are 23. But up until then, you'll always want to default to an emotional place, and occasionally you'll practice making decisions using this computer. The computer in the front asks the brain questions like, what have I done in the past that was effective, and how would that work out for me right now? So you see the difference between children and adult petrified brains like mine are this. If I told an incredibly sad story to a group of 6th graders, I could get them to cry like that. I'm really good at that. I can tell a really scary or sad story, and they will default to that emotional place right away. Kids act on more feelings. But as your brain gets older, you start to reach into that computer in the front. And in fact, all of the adults in the room, if I told that really sad story, they'd say something like this: that was totally sad. I feel the emotion. But I've cried before in this room, and that did not go well for me. So I'm going to pause. Remember the Stanford study? I'm going to pause on that feeling of sadness and wait and go out to my car later and cry there. Hear the difference? The difference of being the Stanford study, the difference of being able to pause on a feeling and act later makes different decision makers, and a lot of that is determined on this wiring up to this computer. Now let me tell one more interesting thing about being in high school. Between birth and 12, the only work your brain is doing is getting a whole lot of connection learning. You learn French, you learn to tie your shoes, you learn to blow out birthday candles, right? And about the time that you go into puberty and beyond, you start to erase these, right? You get to erase some of these roads when you're not using them. Like you haven't spoken Spanish since you were in kindergarten, okay? And you start to build highways instead of roads. And you start to build highways on things that you do all the time and really well and over and over and over again. So this now is French. Here is math. And you build a highway around that. The brain that's under construction in high school becomes your adult brain. So the cool news for you is the decisions and the choices that you make today actually are the ones that will determine what your brain will be when you're an adult, a complete adult, because you really are close to adulthood now. But when you're 35, the brain that you'll have at 35 will be much determined by the brain you're putting together right now. So if you want to be good at math in 35, you actually have to do math problems now. Does that make sense? If you want to be an honest, caring, compassionate person that serves others, do it now. Do it over and over and over again. See, the way you build a highway is you have an emotional decision. You make an action, okay? Anything that you do. And then some sort of consequence occurs from that action. It either affirms or eliminates the idea of the action that you chose. You make a mistake, or you go, wow, great job. Whatever consequence that is, your brain goes, oh, I learned something there. And you actually build a little memory in a spot right here. That's called the hippocampus, and it builds a memory, and that's how you build a highway. So you want to do something good for someone, you get all sorts of positive feedback about it. Next time you go and do the same thing again, and over time, you build these memories, and you build a highway. That's the good news. The challenging news is that's why teenagers are at risk for making decisions that will affect their health and their brain. Because their impulse control is less intact. They have a harder time putting a pause on a feeling. Because they have a harder time being autonomous within a group, because groupthink is so important. Because it's sometimes really, really hard to think beyond this moment to out there, or to think beyond to other people beyond myself. Sometimes you might make a mistake, and then you continue to get feedback around that because you might be more popular, or get less peer pressure, or relieve your stress by that situation, and then you build a memory and you actually build a highway. I'll show you what that means when you think of smoking a cigarette. I bet if I asked all of you how many people interested here in smoking a cigarette, you probably pretty much know that you're not going to smoke a cigarette, or very often. I will tell you that the vast majority of adult smokers started smoking as a teenager. Because teenagers build highways off an addiction. They create addiction so much easier. That's why millions and millions of dollars are actually put to promote smoking to all of you. Because you will build a highway around it to being addicted to a cigarette much faster than me. In fact, so much so that if you do not smoke cigarettes on any sort of regular basis by the time you're 18, the chances of you becoming an adult smoker are virtually zero. Isn't that incredible? Same with alcohol. The vast number of people who are adult problem drinkers started as a teenager. And in fact, if people delay or pause before they act and don't drink on a regular basis in some sort of frequent way, where you're building up this highway, then the chances of you becoming an adult problem drinker if you don't drink until you're older is virtually zero. That's a crazy idea, because it's so much a part of the culture that we're in, which is that teenagers might drink or carry on or have parties or be a part of that. And yet, those decisions impact the brain that you will have. So it's something to think about. The same thing happens when we have sex. We build see, here's another, I think we drew this, did we draw these neurons before? Mm-hmm. Okay. The way these neurons will talk to each other is through those chemicals, right? They don't really touch. What communicates are those chemicals. And the chemicals that communicate and get released when we make decisions and have a consequence are really powerful. One of the biggest consequences of smoking a cigarette is that your brain gets flooded with dopamine. Dopamine is a pleasure. It creates pleasure in your brain. And we already know from talking last time that your brain seeks pleasure and avoids pain. So if you were really stressed and your friends were smoking, and when you tried smoking it released dopamine, and it really worked, so that you built a memory about that. You had the idea that a part of every cigarette has nicotine, which is one of the most addictive substances on the planet, that we give to you legally. The whole idea here is that you're going to build a highway over time and super easily, because you have both an addictive substance, a brain that is really ripe to be addicted, and it releases dopamine so it feels good. The truth is, most people make decisions because it works for them. You rarely make a decision that goes, wow, that really went badly for me in every way. So there's this fabulous study in New York, and it says, why do kids choose to make decisions that would affect their health in a negative way? And kids say, well, because I became more popular. I was part of a group, right? Second, because there was a ton of peer pressure to join in. Didn't want to be autonomous within a group. And third, because it felt good. People choose high-risk behaviors because it works for them in lots of ways. One is it creates pleasure in your brain. Two, it's super exciting. Feels dangerous or interesting or whatever. It gives you tons of feedback, plus the people around you might support you in that. People don't just choose these things because it tastes good or it feels good because you love inhaling smoke. They do it because it tells their brain in all sorts of interesting ways that works for me. So that makes life interesting. Because I will tell you that being health-related decision-making that makes things challenging, there's all sorts of ways that your brains, being what they are, make you amazing people. When you look back at the civil rights movement in the United States, that was built upon the backs of teenagers. There is no, you know how old Martin Luther King was when he did the marches and all that, right? He was at the time when his brain had just matured to about 25 and 26. And most of the people that followed him and went on those buses and things were also teenagers or just over the age of a teenager. And why would that be? Because who else would be that impulsive, that crazy, that risk-taking, right? That willing to put themselves out there at great risk to themselves. What makes it challenging as a teenager navigating through choices around sex and drugs and rock and roll and drinking also is your greatest asset. Because of that impulsiveness, because of the fact that you can put yourself in places of danger that nobody else would, because you find that exciting and interesting to be a part of a movement, you actually are responsible across the history of the planet to actually change the world. But you've got to channel those ideas, right? You have to channel all that amazing brain and put it towards something that works for you, because you're going to build a highway. And you can decide, what kind of highway will my brain develop over time? How will that work for me? So I'll just throw out a scenario for you. Let's just try some out and let me see how it works for you. Let's say you have a new friend. They just moved here really, maybe a month or so ago, so you don't know them super well, but they seem nice. And now you're going to go to his or her house. Let's just make it a him. You're going to, his or her house where his or her older brother is a senior or maybe a college-age student, and he's there with all his friends at your friend's house. And those kids, the older brother, and all of his friends are chewing gum. And they say to you and your friend, hey, do you want some gum? And your friend, who you didn't think chewed gum ever, really had never seen him or her ever chewing gum, said yes. Would you say yes too, or no? What would you do? Does this feel like a peer pressure moment? No. Why not?
It's gum.
So you're saying it's just because it's gum, even though you're the only person now not chewing gum, you feel no pressure to say yes or no. Is that what you're saying?
Lots of people like gum.
Would it change it at all? Would you feel more stress at all if your orthodontist had said to you, Aaron, if I catch you chewing gum and you break a band one more time, you'll probably wear braces for 4 more years. Now, do you feel different in that situation? Does it ramp it up at all? Maybe? Not so much? You might still feel like you might say yes to the gum, or no, or it doesn't matter?
No, it's stupid to say
It's
yes.
stupid?
That'd be a terrible decision.
Don't take the gum. Stay away from the gum. Are you
No,
worried
there's
at
no
all?
positive payoff.
Are you worried at all about how you might look to others in this situation? No. None. All right, how about this? You're over at this friend's house. All the guys that are over there hanging out in the downstairs, they're all smoking a cigarette. You're with your friend. You've never seen your friend smoke a cigarette, but they say, hey, do you want a cigarette? You say, your friend says yes. So now you're the only person not smoking a cigarette. Does that feel different than the gum?
Yeah.
How does it feel different from the gum? All we've done is change from gum to a cigarette. Why is it different? Yeah. Either one. Go ahead. Either one.
Gum can really kill you. I mean,
Could you keel over and die from one cigarette?
no, but it makes you cough a lot, and I hate smoke. It's just not my thing.
So would you feel at all uncomfortable?
I would walk out.
Would you be mad?
No.
What about your friend? Are you just going to leave her there smoking?
No?
Are you worried about losing a friend? So you'd lose a friend over a cigarette, but not so much over gum.
Yeah.
Is that true? Would we actually lose friend over a cigarette, but we wouldn't lose the same friend over gum? Yeah, I find that interesting.
I just talk some sense into my friend.
Would you be mad at the friend for saying yes?
I wouldn't be mad at her. I just feel like that's a dumb decision.
Would it make you think differently about the friend?
Depends on who the friend was.
Yeah.
Probably like I wouldn't smoke. I guess I'd let them do it, not embarrass them if they're older sibling. And then maybe afterwards, like when we're alone, I talk to him about it and we like just talk it out with him and see what's going on and why he's doing it. Try and convince him otherwise.
I'm going to assume that there are people in here that smoke, or people who've already chosen not to smoke. And I'm going to bet that few of you are wondering, am I ever going to smoke, not smoke? I wonder what I'm going to do. How many people here feel confident about the yes and no about smoking? You either are a smoker, yes, or you're never going to smoke, no. Raise your hand if you're confident of your answer in this moment about smoking. 100% sure. Okay, anybody at all willing to say why they would feel unsure? Anybody unsure? Yeah, why?
I'm just gonna be honest here and say if it was marijuana, then I would be unsure.
We're not talking marijuana, 'cause we'll get there. This is a cigarette.
Because if it's a cigarette, I think that we're all been raised to know that they're harmful, and I feel like that's much less, like, current, and that's much less, and I feel like it's more well known that they are genuinely dangerous.
You know totally clearly this list of consequences of smoking a cigarette.
Yeah.
Tell me what they are.
Addiction, so that means you would be spending a lot of money on it. You would probably eventually die if you were addicted. Cancer. Grossness.
Bad teeth.
Bad breath.
Bad breath.
Coffee.
Bad skin.
Mucus.
Bad skin.
Yeah.
Okay, so does everybody agree that you pretty much know that list? And you're pretty much already decided, if you're a smoker, you already decided this is not a big thing for me, and if you aren't a smoker, you already decided I'm not into it. Are you still unsure? You sound sure now. You're sure you're not going to smoke a cigarette.
Well, yeah.
Okay,
Uh,
okay.
always.
Anybody actually feel at all nervous about this decision? Pretty sure. Okay.
Well, this might sound like a joke, but in all seriousness, if there's ever like a moment where I do something like really awesome, like Will Smith when he like in the movie. I can't remember the movie's name, but he saves the world from aliens, and he has a victory cigar.
Yes.
So like, if I do something like that, I would want to have a victory.
Okay, but that in the scenario I'm okay, I like that. I'm not going to hold you to the lack of a victory cigar. Okay, I love that. That's honest. I love that. Okay, I'm saying in this moment, because everybody else is smoking, you would feel unsure what to do.
Then I wouldn't feel.
Okay, nobody feels unsure. Okay, I'm just going to change it up. Same exact scenario, relatively new friend, don't know them super well, they seem so great, you're over to her house, you're down in the basement, really cool older brothers, all of his really fun friends, and they're all drinking a beer. They say, do you want one?
Yes.
Is that different than the gum and the cigarette? How is it different? All we have changed is to beer.
Beer smells bad.
So do you feel clear about your decision here because it's about smell?
I'm firm in not drinking, so.
Okay. Does it feel like more pressure to you, though, because
Yes.
it's beer? Why?
Well, because like especially like at Skyline, it's like there's like a party every weekend. But like I know if I'm like at one of the situations, like I know people that wouldn't be like drinking, so I would just stick with them.
So the pressure's up because it happens more around you. She's already said smoking is already sort of old news,
Yeah.
but beer's new news,
Well, I
or
feel like
it's
it's just,
current
like,
news.
A part of high school, like especially up here, because it's easy to get, I guess.
Right. So the fact that it's more common and more around you changes up this scenario. But gum was the most common thing I could think of. And yet you didn't have the same feelings. So it's not that really, is it? Is that it's common. What makes this different than the gum then? Yes.
Well, like, cigarettes, like, there's, like, a big chance of you getting addicted to it. Beer, like, it seems like just, like, everybody drinks it. And, like, if you have, like, one sip, it's not gonna, like, affect you. Like,
If
or,
you
like,
have one cigarette,
majorly.
you're not going to get addicted.
Like, yeah, you feel like it's no big deal.
So you learned back in 6th grade when the world was black and white that if you smoke a cigarette,
That's a big deal.
that's a big deal.
It's very bad.
But the list for beer doesn't seem quite so boldly written as the cigarette list.
Because also, like, there's a lot of people who have, like, older siblings and, like, relatives and all that that drink beer. Everybody, like, it's fair to say that everybody has drank a beer in their life for over a year.
Okay, now when you ask anybody my age, all of our parents smoked cigarettes.
Yeah.
And all of our grandparents smoked cigarettes. And yet we've been able to not smoke cigarettes this generation because we've done a fantastic job of shutting this baby down right now with you, right? So successful.
It's not even super old, like where I.
One generation, I'm it.
Yeah, well, no, even like my coworkers, I'm the only person I know at my work who doesn't smoke out of like the 25 employees.
Yeah.
And they're all like, you know, anywhere from like 20 to 30.
Well, and we have I could go on and on about that. That's an interesting idea. But tell me more about the beer.
Well, I feel like in high school there's a lot of pressure to fit in and to be accepted, and lots of times like cigarettes, people don't want to like smell weird, and it's not like alcohol is a lot more common, and a lot of times like at parties and stuff, it's cool. I guess for some people, it's like to fit in, they do it, but with cigarettes, a lot, I think there's more.
Okay, I love that.
Emotion fitting in feeling.
So you've added something new here that wasn't really there for cigarettes or gum, and that's this thing about being a part of something and fitting in, right? Before, you felt confident being autonomous within a group, right? Because cigarettes you've already decided about. Even if everybody was smoking, clearly not for me. But you are also saying what's new here that feels stronger or more powerful or more interesting or more challenging is this idea of perhaps something that's more pervasive and less of a strong list here. And I might feel like I'm actually part of something. When this really fantastic study in New York said, what are those three things? Popular, right? To be thought of well, to be a part of something, and because it feels good, all that works for beer. What else? Yeah.
I think like if you smoke a cigarette afterwards, you're gonna feel like you want another one, I guess. But like if you finish a beer, you're probably gonna feel like you want another one too. But it's gonna be more unsafe to like leave the situation. It would be harder to, and like you wouldn't be able to get home safely, as if you would be if you had just smoked one cigarette.
You're going to drive. It's more interesting for you to drive with someone who's driven after 2 cigarettes than 2 beers. It's changed the way you think and respond and able to drive. That's helpful. Put you more at risk for sexual assault. It puts you more at risk for doing something idiotic like jumping off the porch or into the swimming pool or making out with somebody that you don't really like or doing something really weird. But it seems popular to do it. Interesting. All right, yeah. Anybody else? Anybody here worried? I got one thing. Nobody said a word. I'm really like to hear from the guys on this. Anybody thinking that I feel peer pressure here because they will think I'm a loser if I don't say yes? Can anybody identify with that? They'll think I'm... Anybody? Go ahead.
I know I keep talking, but like I think our generation, I think our generation has been like taught that like people aren't going to be like, oh, you're uncool if you do like this one thing. Like some people actually like look up to people that don't.
Yeah.
Do that, or, like,
And I will tell you that 99.9% of peer pressure is unspoken. It's very rare for me to go, Aaron, come over to the dark side and have a cigarette. But where would the peer pressure come from then? Because peer pressure exists. Where does peer pressure actually come from? Yes.
So I think it's more self-imposed, and it's that, and you're watching a TV show when you're younger, and you get that idea. Well, you find all these things about like peer pressure. This is a real thing. Okay, well, I'm gonna go through it. I might as well prepare for it, or like I'm gonna eventually have to deal with it. But maybe it's not even there. It's just the idea kind of began somewhere, and then it just kind of like developed within yourself, I guess.
If I say, Aaron, do you want a beer? A whole series of things goes through her head. Will she change how she thinks of me, whether I say yes or no here? Will she notice if I say yes or no here? Will other people around me notice if I say yes or no? How will I feel if I do say yes or no myself? Most peer pressure happens right up here in Erin's head. Because she's making a judgment call on what she thinks I will think about her. Isn't that an intriguing idea? Versus peer pressure, you think on if you watch a movie, or your parents might think peer pressure is all about somebody going, you know what, you're a dog loser if you don't say yes now. It's really not like that, right? Yes.
Okay, I think that peer pressure comes from, like, for girls at least, a lot of it I think is girls want to be, like, similar to each other, the ones that are friends. So if one of them wants to, like, smoke a cigarette or, like, drink or something else, then they'll convince somebody else in the group to do it with them because they don't want to do that alone.
Do you remember what we talked about? Were you here last time?
Yeah.
Because when your brain as a girl does something where you tend and befriend, you get flooded by oxytocin, another fantastic communicator of those things. So not only do you have the pleasure of a drink, you have pleasure of being part of something. So yes.
So, and I feel like a lot of people say, like, people who want to, like, make other people do stuff and the ones who are, like, encouraging peer pressure are bad people. And I think they're more just the people who want everyone to be part of it.
Yeah.
But they're just taking it the wrong way.
It comes off friendly. I'm offering you a beer. Do you want to be a part of something? That's interesting, yes.
Also, I know, like, me and my friends were really alike, so if they do something, and, like, we're really alike, so if they would do something, I'll just be like, why are they doing it, and what's different with me, because we're really alike, so it kind of be a little weird.
You can see how it might be hard to be autonomous within that group. Any other thoughts? I've really not heard from the guys. If it's true what guys, if it's true about girls choosing something to be a part of something, is it true then for guys that you'd want them not to think less of you? Because we talked about that. When you're in a situation for a guy, it's that you don't want to be on the bottom. You want to be on the top. So to maintain yourself from not being on the bottom is some of your thinking, well, I don't know, it's not my thing here, but I don't want them to think I'm, right? Yeah.
I don't know. I'd say almost from my observations, it's a lot easier to be autonomous as a guy than as a girl. Just something I've noticed.
Other thoughts about that?
Just to like add to that, I think a lot of guys, they just like don't care. You know, it's like, all right, I'm not gonna have a beer. I don't really care what you think. It's your decision. Like, I'll respect you and I won't give you any crap if you drink a beer. But it's like, I want the same respect from you, and so then you just kind of have the mutual expectations. I think the only time that a guy would really like care is if a girl was involved.
Oh.
Like, you know, if it was a girl asking someone like, hey, do you want a beer? You know, I was like, oh, you're cute. Let me think about this.
Oh, that's fun to hear. It's so harder to get something for you. I should have changed the story for you. That's an intriguing idea. Because it'd be more of a performance then.
Exactly. It's like
you're strutting your peacock feathers right there. Am I cool enough?
Like, no.
I love that. Thanks for being honest about that. That is fantastic. Very insightful. Yes.
Maybe like if the older sibling or whatever in your example just wanted to offer them, like they're not like, they kind of want to like kind of say this kind of like a friendly gesture, like they're not like, come on, have a beer, have a beer. It's more like, do you want a beer? Because I'm drinking beer.
Right.
I'm drinking beer. I just don't want to leave you out.
Right.
I guess like they could be like, well, maybe I'll be your big brother and get you into this kind of stuff. Like, I don't know. I feel like maybe that could be a portion of the situation.
Let me just say a couple of things, because I have to as a nurse, that I want you to remember when you think of that list that's here for a cigarette. I just want to point out a couple of things that I want you to know that would be in bold here. Okay? People, when they're a teenager, most people have sex when they're under the influence of alcohol. Okay? Second, a teen brain responds to alcohol different than the petrified adult brains in here. The petrified adult brains in here, after 2 drinks, starts to feel sleepy. You, the amazing brains that are just over here turning off into highways, it takes sometimes 5 drinks for you to feel sleepy. That's why people who are teenagers in college are more at risk for having too many drinks, because you actually don't have the same effect. The rest of us would be like, oh, I'm so tired, let me lie down. Right? And you're still going. What would put that even more at risk is if you took alcohol and mixed it with what? Caffeine, Simple caffeine, and what do people do with that? They take a Red Bull with vodka, right? They take a Red Bull with something else. They bring caffeine and alcohol together. Think about you and think about all that scenario that you added up to that I'm telling you. You're going to build a highway around drinking. And the more drinks you add to it, the more underlined this list gets in my mind for you. So you have to pay attention because your brain will shut off all warning signs to you. Your brain doesn't function like our brain, which starts to shut off with feeling tired, sleepy, and drunk. Your brain continues to ignite until you've had too much for you. Then that puts you even more at risk for the other things like sex and driving and all sorts of jumping off of things and being nutty. All right? So I'm just throwing that out because I want you to know the truth about the bold list here. It is not an invisible list. It's a real list for you. All right, I'm going to send you off to your groups, and I think it would be interesting to talk about peer pressure and making mistakes and what it means in God's eyes when, you're trying to be a good person out there. But I'm going to end with the very last few sentences in Psalm 139, and I think about this all the time. It says, search me. So the very beginning it says, you have searched me. You already know me. And the very last paragraph of Psalm 139 invites God to search you further. It says, search me, God, and know my heart. Test me and know my anxious thoughts. See if there is any offensive way in me and lead me in the way everlasting. It's like you're inviting God to be a part of leading you into the next situation that you go into. Because if you're an interesting person with a lot of friends and interesting places that you put yourself in, you're going to be in situations that are hard or unexpected. You're going to head off to your freshman year of college. You're going to be in a new situation. You're going to be at a job where other people are choosing different activities. You're going to be with a cousin in some other city that the whole way that they process decision making is different than yours, and you're spending the summer with them. Whatever that looks like. I guarantee you'll be in a situation within the next 3 years where someone will want you to get into a car where someone's been drinking, or smoking pot, or taking drugs, and they're driving. I guarantee that. I guarantee you're going to be in a situation where someone is going to solicit or be interested or inviting you or in some sort of scenario where you have to make a decision about sex under the influence of something. Whether the people around you are soliciting that they're under the influence because it's part of the tsunami of the culture that you live in. And part of what I encourage you to think about is the highways that you're building. And what makes it an asset for you as you make those decisions is that you're courageous people. You put yourself out there. You'll make mistakes. Mistakes will happen. And that psalm just rings through for me over and over and over that no matter what I do, if I make my bed in the depths, God's there. And even if the world is changing around me, Jesus remains the same today, tomorrow, and always. And that's helpful for me. Because whether you're a teenager or 53, the rest of all this world kind of feels chaotic sometimes and uncertain. So with that, I'd love to say a prayer because I'm not planning on coming back, so I'm going to send you off with a prayer. And I appreciate so much for you participating and speaking your mind. Father God, you're our creator. You have made us human beings capable of joy and laughter and passion and compassion. You regularly test us and know us and listen to us and fill us up. And as you work with us and hone us and sharpen us, let us be your people. Guide us, God, as we head out into the world. Sometimes it's uncertain whether we should put our left foot first or our right. But we know that if we just start walking, sometimes it's you that is surrounding us, hemming us in, behind and before, and we can rest in that. Let us step forward with confidence, knowing that you are forever. And let us be useful tools in the world to bring the kingdom of God right here to the planet Earth. Because that's what you have called us to do. And we ask this in your name. Amen.